Wow, listen to those sweet tunes.
Ooh, so good.
You hear that wonderful melody leading us in this week?
We're basically professionals now.
Just fantastic. We've officially made it big time when you have intro music. That's a whole new ball game for us, I would say, for sure.
Oh, absolutely, man. And hey, this is episode 20, right? We had to do something big for it. So we are now official, have a intro, and dang, 20 episodes. Did you think we would make this many episodes?
Yeah, I can't believe we finally hit double digits, dude.
Double digits?
Oh, wait.
We hit double digits.
Double digits, yeah. Well, quadruple digits? Oh, maybe we'll get to 1,000 episodes one day. Who knows? Maybe by that point we'll have doubled our fan base from 2 to 4.
What we'll do is we'll just go back and take all of our old episodes and cut them into tenths, and then suddenly we'll have 200 episodes, and then we're just a fifth of the way there. So
yeah, brilliant. We could have just been doing little 5-minute snippets this whole time, and instead of these hour-long cuts, and got way more content out of it, I guess. But it's actually like those I forget what they're called, but it's like tests for toddlers for basic logical functions, I guess, where they have like 2 graham crackers on one side and 1 on the other, and they're like, oh, is this even? And they're like, no, because this is 2 and this is 1. And then you break the 1 in half, so there's just 2 smaller pieces. And then they're like, oh, now it's fair because it's 2 and 2, not grasping, basic spatial awareness or anything like that. I saw a video like that recently. I don't know why that popped into my head, but that's what I was reminded of.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, if we just cut our 20 episodes into 1,000 1-minute segments, then we'd have so many more episodes and so much more content.
Oh, I know. Yeah, if we were big time YouTubers too, how people who are on YouTube put out 10-minute and 1 second videos or 10-minute and 6 seconds. Instead of making a longer video, they make it as short as possible to still get the most ad revenue, because that 10-minute mark, man. Maybe if we made ours 10 minutes, we could actually make some money on this, but that's not happening. We're not here to make money. We're here to have fun and entertain.
Yeah, we
the
don't
fans.
do it for income. We do it, strictly for mostly personal entertainment, I would say. I think we have the most fun making this than other people do listening to
definitely.
it. But
my favorite part of
who cares?
My favorite part of every week or 2 weeks or month, whenever we're able to record, is actually recording. So it's it's fun. Again, we've been doing this.
Aww.
Again, we've been doing this and having these conversations for a long time, and we just decided we'll record them and see if anyone else cares. So we're gonna keep talking no matter what and having a good time about it. But man, Steve, we have something really exciting to talk about this week. Something that I've been hyped about. And we've had some conversations behind the scenes because we are now a few weeks into it. And I'm really excited to get some of your official thoughts on it and just dive into... Steve, what are we talking about this week?
We are talking about the new Amazon Prime show, Wheel of Time. And we're 3 weeks into it. There's 3 weeks remaining. But we're 5 episodes in because Amazon decided to release the first 3 episodes kind of as one shot in the beginning to get people, I guess, invested instead of just off the pilot. And we've talked about this before on the pod, but I'll reiterate it here. Wheel of Time is based off an epic fantasy series by Robert Jordan. I believe there's, you can correct me, 15 books in the series?
Yep, there's 14 in the main series and 1 prequel, so 15 total.
Okay, I was going to guess 15 in the main series and 1 prequel, but we'll just pretend I got it right anyways. You have read all these books, and I have not. Now, they have been on my radar for a while, even before you and Julia, our sister, got into reading them, and you have both finished the series since.
She is not actually.
But I knew that the show was coming out. Oh, she has.
No, she's on.
Exposed.
She's on book
Julia,
9.
Finish reading.
She's on book 9, but she is cruising through.
Oh my gosh, you're slacking, dude. What are you doing?
To be fair, it took me 2.5 years to finish this series. It is a behemoth. Every book is huge too. They're not small books, so I don't know. Each individual book is probably about the size of 2 of the Lord of the Rings books, and there's 14 plus a prequel. So it's
Well, I'm looking forward to reading all that, but I'll give Julia a little bit of extra flack. Sorry, you're catching strays right out the gate here, Jules. But I also got her the Dune book series last Christmas, and there's just no chance she's ever getting to that in any sort of reasonable amount of time with all the Wheel of Time she has left to finish. But yeah, you have read all these books, and I have not. I knew that the show was coming out, and so I specifically am putting off reading the books until later so that I can have a kind of unfiltered perspective on the show. And both of us having different experiences with the show, you know, one with knowledge of the source material and one going in completely fresh, I think is going to make for an interesting dynamic. And you're pretty good about spoilers, so it's not like you're one of those book readers who is going to, you know, tell me what's coming up next. But I do appreciate so far. I've had some questions, and you've been able to provide additional context or book clues that don't spoil anything and just give me background info on these characters. Because there's only so much you can do, and even an hour-long episode, which the first 5 of these have been, obviously you can never adapt every single thing from a book source material without expecting, you know, your show or movie version to be 10 hours long per episode. So with a world with this much lore and depth and so many characters to explore, obviously there were going to be changes, and so I think it's going to be interesting to see our 2 different takes on the show so far from our different perspectives. But I want to know what your initial reaction was to the first 5 episodes of Wheel of Time.
Yeah, well, before I get into that, I'm actually going to give a bit of a contextual explanation of kind of my mindset coming into the show, and especially coming into these episodes and talking about and kind of as a fan, my enjoyment factor and just like critically evaluating the show. So I started reading The Wheel of Time, like I said, 2.5 years ago. And at that point, I did not know that there was a show coming out. I think I probably would have been along the same mindset as you, where if I knew that one was coming out, I might have waited to, you know, enjoy the show before reading it. And then I found out about a year after I started reading it that there was this show coming out. And so then I was like, well, I'm already in too deep now. I was already 6 or 7 books in. I'm just finishing it. And my hype has just gotten so big for this show, just because as I've read the books, they've just got better and better. And so just the thought, when I would get to a specific scene, a massive battle or a huge, crazy, like climactic twist, I just would imagine reading the book. I cannot wait to see this on screen. Like, there are some absolutely mind-blowing things that happen in this series, and it definitely takes some building, but it's so good, and I was just more and more excited as I read, imagining what would end up on screen. And so heading into the first episode, I knew, okay, there's of course going to be changes. You have to take these massive books and condense them even into 8 hours is a feat to do. And just the way that Robert Jordan wrote the books, a lot of character growth and things like that happen through internal thought processes of the characters, which is obviously something that's relatively difficult to transfer to the screen. And so I was curious as to how that would get portrayed on TV, curious how they would take, I mean, there's thousands and thousands of characters in the books, and I literally have an app on my phone that like is basically a glossary and explains, you know, who the character is. You can put your chapter in your book that you're on, and so it doesn't spoil past that, and it just says who they are up to that point in the book, basically. And I'm like, how the heck do you take all of these and make it in a show that makes sense? So I was really interested, knowing some things were going to have to change, and just overall very excited. So there have already been some pretty large changes just in the first 5 episodes. I think some of which have been actually really good and have made a whole lot of sense. So I will make comments about how things are different than the book when it's relevant, and where I think there have been things that are helpful. But I'm also, at this point, I've adjusted my mindset to just understand that it's a totally different medium, and I'm going to be enjoying the show for the show and doing my best to evaluate the show as a show rather than, you know, the book with people acting it out. Because there are just time constraints, there's some budgetary constraints, although Amazon spent an absolute fortune on this series so far, and you know, just some storytelling limitations that you have when you're telling it, on a screen. So yeah, so that's kind of my mindset coming in. I'm going to do my best to treat this as a totally different medium because it is, and almost a different story. And I'll say in that sense, it's been awesome. I'll just say that right off the bat. There are definitely some things that I think could have been done slightly better. I think for me, the first episode and parts of the second episode were the weakest parts of the show so far. I think the first episode specifically stands out as a bit boring and rushed, and so I think that could have been handled differently, but I do understand why it was kind of the case, because most of the interesting stuff that happens once they leave, and past that I think it's just been better and better, and I think every episode's gotten better since then. So overall, I've been very pleased with it, even with there being some pretty major changes from the books already. I've been pretty impressed with the first 5 episodes so far. And we can get into some specific details, but what are your thoughts on the first 5 episodes, Steve?
Yeah, I would have to agree with you that the first probably 2 episodes as a whole were the weakest of the series so far. And, it's easy to say that when there's only been 5 episodes. Obviously, the show's going to draw a lot of comparisons to something like Game of Thrones. And, speaking of spending a fortune on the show, it's really nothing to compared to what Amazon is spending on the Lord of the Rings show that's about to premiere in the new year. But, yeah, I definitely think that it kind of felt like a generic fantasy adventure to start it off. You have 4 kind of... I know that they've obviously are different in the books, and I feel like I'm just going to say that a ton just by habit.
Mm-hmm.
But the beginning of the show, it seems like the 4 characters that we start following in the 2 rivers, Rand, Matt, Perrin, and Egwene, and Nynaeve, but she is gone from the episode after episode 1. They seem like pretty blank slates. And obviously they've come into their own a little bit more as the episodes have gone on, but I did not really feel instant attachment to any of them in the beginning, and maybe that's how it's supposed to be. As you learn more about them, as they journey throughout the world and they go from kind of ignorant small townsfolk to learning a ton about the world that they inhabit and getting out and seeing parts of it they've never been to before, and learning about the lore and mythology of the One Power and the Dark One and the Aes Sedai and all this other stuff. It feels like we're supposed to be learning along with them, which I really appreciate, but in watching the first couple episodes, it was very jarring isn't quite the right word, but it wasn't quite as interesting as I had hoped, because these characters didn't really have a ton going on for me. They each had maybe 1 or 2 scenes that showed what their personality was supposed to be. Matt had the scene in the tavern where he was gambling and then stole a girl's bracelet to sell for merchandise for his family. So you get the sense that he's kind of a rapscallion with, a heart of gold as he does stuff for his family and the ones he loves. But the other ones, like I said, really got maybe 1 or 2 scenes total in the first couple episodes. And I think it's really important to have a strong cast, especially if these are going to be, obviously I don't know what happens to these characters as we go on. Some of them could die. I don't know. But it seems like these 4 are going to carry the story on their shoulders for the most part as we go through the rest of this season and potentially into later seasons. And I just think it's really important to start off with the basic characters that you can really connect with and, be attached to from the jump. And I just didn't feel that right away. I've since changed my mind, because I think the following episodes did a really good job of exploring each character as the band got split up along the way, and we end up following, 3 different groups as they all journey to the White Tower. But that allowed us to get some more one-on-one time with each of the characters as they are journeying in smaller groups, instead of trying to find smaller character moments within a group of 6 or 7. We got interpersonal moments between Perrin and Egwene as they're traveling with the Tinkers, Matt and Rand as they escape the Fade with Tom, seemingly sacrificing himself. R.I.P. Tom. I really hope he's not dead, but we never saw a body. I'm holding out hope that he's out there somewhere. But then we also had Moraine and Lan, who are the Aes Sedai and her warder that scooped up the main characters in the 2 rivers, and they are separated from the group again, like I said. And we really learn, especially this last episode. I thought episode 5 was really all about learning about the Aes Sedai and their warders, and the whole episode was just dedicated to exploring that bond, which, from what I gather, is supposed to be, just the greatest. Love is probably not the right word. It seems to be like stronger than love. I believe they described it as a stronger bond than, father and son.
Husband and wife.
Stronger than the bond between two lovers. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, we really felt that this episode with,
Steppen.
The scene of the other warder, Steppen, bringing back the ring of his fallen Aes Sedai, and then, later committing suicide because he was unable to live with, that emotional bond being shattered. And I think like I said, the previous episodes in the show, namely 1 and 2, didn't really do a good job of exploring that, but I'm willing to give a ton of leeway, especially with a story this grand. You have to have some world building and setup, and you can't have a ton of deep emotional character moments right off the bat. So as the show's gone on, I've appreciated the first couple episodes more in retrospect, but in watching them, I was not necessarily immediately hooked by any of the characters or anything like that.
Yeah, I remember having a conversation with you after you watched the first couple of episodes, and you said something along the lines of, I'm not super into it, I see the potential, but I'm still waiting to see where it goes, right? And of course, from my perspective, I'm like, I see all these characters that I followed for 2.5 years through all this stuff, and I'm like, I'm just freaking out seeing them on screen. But I actually watched the first 3 episodes 3 times each, and as I got over that fact, just the excitement, I really did see a few of the weaknesses, because some of the main characters, and especially in the first episode, I totally get what you were saying, just the blank slateness. Some of them seem to not have a whole lot of personality, specifically Rand, Perrin, and Egwene didn't really seem to have a whole lot of personality. You pointed out Matt, who was the one who has his little sisters and his parents who are neglectful, is the polite way of saying that, kind of just terrible people. And so even when he's...
I was going to say, neglectful is extremely polite.
I'm trying to be very polite.
Be just absolute garbage human beings.
Yeah, exactly.
But we haven't seen him since, so...
Yeah, so you see him stealing to get lanterns for his sisters, and you see his instinct is to immediately protect them, which leads to a really sad moment later on in episode 4. But other than Matt, there's not a whole lot of development for the other ones in the first episode, and that's okay. Realistically, they introduce, from what we know now, at least 7 main characters, Moiraine and Lan, plus the 5 from the 2 rivers, and introducing and getting to know 7 people in just an hour is very difficult, right? Especially when they have to be around for a long time. And that's where I think Amazon, this is going to be a bit of a step back from the show specifically, I think Amazon kind of has they've hit the perfect note by putting out 3 episodes on the premiere date and then week by week. Because we have kind of a couple opposites, because up until the last few shows, Disney Plus has kind of been going the route of 1 episode per week, right? They've started adding more, like with Hawkeye, they put out the first 2 episodes, and they've done that more with some of the recent shows, but for the first year or so, like with the first season of The Mandalorian, for example, it was just 1 episode per week. And then you have Netflix on the other end of the spectrum, where they just dump a season and you can binge it all immediately. And I think there's advantages to both of those, right? But I think Amazon kind of hits the sweet spot where I think if I didn't know the books and I turned on and watched the first episode and then I had to wait another week to the second episode, there wouldn't really have been anything to hook me to keep me going. And I think that, you're just not attached enough to the characters, and they kind of rush through everything that happens just to get them to leave, something that in the books takes, multiple chapters to happen. I think if only 1 episode had come out that first week, it would have been very difficult for a lot of people to be interested in continuing. But then again, if you drop the whole season at once, I really think there is something fun and exciting about being able to predict what's going to happen and really dissect the episodes in between. And for me, being able to watch the first 3 episodes 3 times and really digest a lot of the small dialogue moments or scenes that only take a minute that I hadn't even noticed the first time, things like that, just having the space between week to week to really go back and digest those moments. Like every time that I watched those first three, I liked it even more. Even though I was more aware of some of the flaws, there was a lot more in between small little scenes and small little comments that really brought a lot more out of those characters and the plot. And so I want to applaud Amazon for deciding to do that. And even we've seen Disney Plus has started to follow suit, and that's definitely not by accident. Yeah, I'm really grateful that they decided to do it that way, and it still leaves us with something to look forward to for the next few weeks.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think, obviously for existing fans of the franchise, you probably only needed one episode, and even if it weren't spectacular or, blew you away right off the bat, obviously you would have been invested to see how it turns out, being a fan of the source material. But I do think, and maybe this is, obviously they understand that a week-to-week release gives time to hypothesize and ponder about what's going to happen in the future, and that just generates chatter and buzz on a weekly basis that you wouldn't get if you dropped the whole season at once. So, it's definitely some marketing involved right there, on the part of the distributor to ensure that people are keeping the Wheel of Time franchise in their mouths for the next. Well, I don't know. Why did I say it like that? I'm edit that.
That's staying in.
Yo, pause. It's definitely a bit of marketing decision on the side of Amazon to ensure that Wheel of Time stays in the general conversation, on a week-to-week basis. So I wouldn't say it's all for the benefit of the viewer, but I definitely do appreciate that. And even if it's, marketing, like I do enjoy waiting week to week, and there's something to be said for the suspense of a cliffhanger every episode and not being able to immediately dive in and see what happens. Keeping you on edge for, 6 more days is, that's how everybody used to watch TV back in the day. So I do appreciate that. But yeah, I have certainly enjoyed the last few episodes more, and I can see how this story is going to evolve into something really grand, I hope. I mentioned Game of Thrones earlier, and it's probably going to come up a lot in our review of this show, the comparison, just because of the, fantasy setting. But Thrones obviously has, in the first episode, a shocking ending to the premiere where, Bran is thrown from the tower after he sees, the Lannister siblings, getting down and dirty in the tower in Winterfell. And that for me was a premiere that, like, I obviously hadn't read the books at that point either. And that premiere, I was like, I need to watch the next episode right now. And that was a show that hooked me from the start. But I actually have rewatched Thrones recently. Don't ask me why, because I got to the end and immediately hated myself for finishing it again. Whole different can of worms. I'm not even going to open it up. But the first season of Thrones is fantastic, but it's a very slow pace compared to the rest of the show. Even, not the breakneck pace of 7 and 8 notwithstanding, even seasons like 2 through 6 move at a much faster clip than season 1 does. The majority of season 1, takes place like on the King's Road as people are traveling long distances, and the show goes at a slower pace to really emphasize, the size of the kingdom that they're traversing. And it's not going to be the type of show where people just fly around to important locations all at once. Like, important things happen in little dialogue scenes along the way. And the first season is just a masterclass in that. It's just a slow detective story about Ned uncovering the mystery of the Baratheon children's true parentage. And it works so well. But it does also do the same thing where it takes the time to introduce dozens of characters, sometimes 3 or 4 with each new episode, that are going to stick around for a long time, and you have to get to know them. But it doesn't necessarily give each character their moment to shine right away. And so that's something that I had to think back on for these couple episodes of Wheel of Time, where I was like, okay, if these characters are going to be the building blocks of the show, which, again, it seems like they are, these 4 or 5 characters are going to be the cornerstones of the whole plot moving forward. You want to take the time to build them up naturally. And as I say that, I'm hoping that, there's not a Ned Stark of this franchise where, maybe Rand dies at the end of book one, and I'll just be completely wrong. Save this clip for when it happens, if it happens, and maybe I'll be a prophet. But it doesn't seem like this is, written in quite the same vein as Thrones, where, any character can just die at any time based on, their actions. This seems to be more of the prototypical good versus evil. Good will prevail eventually, but it's how we get there that is what's important. So I'm not expecting everybody to make it to the end, but I do expect that, these characters that they're building up will come into their own along the way, in their own time.
Yeah, it will be very interesting to follow along with the characters, and I mean, this is going to get a lot of comparisons to Thrones, and I think just the book series is something that I hope ends up being true for Thrones, because unfortunately Robert Jordan did pass away before finishing the series. He had written up through book 11 and passed away before he was able to finish what he thought was going to be the final book, and was able to pass off through his wife, who was his editor, notes and the final chapter itself, but also just notes and storylines and plot points to Brandon Sanderson, who is another fantasy author who was able to finish what was supposed to be the last book, turned into 3 books, books 12, 13, and 14. And I'm hoping that happens with Thrones, man, because at this point it's clear that Martin's not going to finish. And I hope that
Dude, George does not care.
I hope that someone is able to pick it up and give it a good ending, because it deserves it, regardless of what the show is. The book series deserves a good ending, and so that's something that we have to look forward to in the Wheel of Time, as long as the show is popular enough for Amazon to actually bring it through to completion. Which I don't even know how many seasons it's going to take or how many years, but it will be well worth it by the end, because it's a good ending and it's well earned. So let's dive into some of the specifics.
That's one more thing. Oh, sorry.
No, go for it.
Yeah, that is one more thing that I meant to add, in the comparisons to Thrones. Thrones obviously completely different ball game, because they actually outpaced the source material, which when the show started, there was no thought that would happen, as George was about ready to put out Winds of Winter, according to him, and then Dream of Spring to follow. And it's been friggin' 10 years, and Winds of Winter just has not seen the light of day. So there's not going to be an issue with that. With Wheel of Time, it's impossible for them to outpace the source material. But with 14 books, it is going to be interesting. Are they planning to do a season per book? The 14 year show with a season a year, I would be all in for. But then you run into the problems of actors being available all that time. Tons of logistical issues with a show running that long. On the other hand, if you choose to condense the story, to make it logistically more feasible, you run the risk of cutting out extremely important plot points and scenes that, would have great bearing later on. If you have to do 2 books in one season, like that would be extremely rushed, in my opinion. This first season's already going at, a decent clip from what I can tell. And from what I've read online, there are some book readers that are concerned that they're not going to even make it to the end of book 1 at the pace that, the characters are moving here. So, 2 different problems, but I think that those would be good problems to have, again, compared to Thrones, where they literally had to have the showrunners pull stuff out of their butts because the author couldn't get off of his own and finish his story.
Yeah, well, the books for Wheel of Time are probably about 30%, maybe 40% for some of the later ones, bigger than each of the books in Thrones. And Game of Thrones had 10 episodes per season, not 8. So at least for this first season, there's already been a good amount that's been cut out or condensed. And I think it's all been totally fine. I mean, there are some things that, might have paid off in slight amounts later, but realistically, everything that they've cut out or condensed has been totally reasonable to do so, and has really just helped the pace of this season. And it definitely is moving quickly, and there's still a lot that has to happen before the the first book finishes in just 3 episodes. However, I think even with those adjustments, it hasn't been detracting from the story at all. It's still been awesome to follow, and they've been able to introduce some characters in ways that didn't happen before and still make total sense for the story. So, but yeah, we can stop talking about the length of this series and the future, because right now we just got 5 episodes, and I want to ask you a few questions on those episodes and just see what your thoughts are, because I'm curious. Well, mostly I just want to say, who's your favorite character at this point, and who is your least favorite character, either in terms of the person you hate the most or the person that's the least interesting to you?
Oh, baby, that's a tough question. I think I would say my favorite character so far is Lan Mondragon. Is that his last name?
Mandragoran.
His surname? Mandragoran.
It's a lot. It's a mouthful.
Totally not dragon. Okay, I'm just calling him Lan. Yeah, his character, when they got introduced, I didn't really understand the Warder Aes Sedai connection. He just seemed to be, emotionless bodyguard for this crazy witch lady. And clearly that couldn't have been further from the case. I mean, like I said, the last episode 5, really delved into the relationships that warders and their Aes Sedai have. The actor for Lan, I am going to hate myself if I can't remember his name, Daniel Henney, who's also, I don't know why I always remember him, because I'm sure he's been in other amazing stuff also, but I remember him as one of the agents in X-Men Origins Wolverine, the guy who blows up in the helicopter after killing the farmers that Logan gets a motorcycle and leather jacket from. And like I said, I'm sure he's been in other stuff, and clearly this is a show where he's getting to showcase some of his acting chops. But man, that last scene, Steppen's funeral in episode 5, dude just acted his heart out. I mean, his wails of grief, like, I felt those as his, he felt the guilt and pain of losing his best friend to suicide. As he definitely felt like he could have prevented that. They're having the conversation the night before, and Lan was doing everything he could to keep his friend in good spirits. And then Steppen drugs him with the tea that Nynaeve gave him, takes a knife, and Lan, by the time Lan wakes up and finds him, it's too late. And man, the acting in the funeral scene was just spectacular. Yeah. I mean, he really sold it. And on top of that, his conversations with Nynaeve, where he's delved a little bit more into the relationship between him and Moraine, not necessarily just the warders and Aes Sedai in general. And he's kind of changing Nynaeve's perspective on the Aes Sedai. She stated earlier in the show that she has a distrust and kind of hatred for the Aes Sedai. Because of traumatic events in her childhood. And he's teaching her that not everything is as black and white as she thinks it is. And I really appreciate that. Obviously as a viewer, he's basically explaining to us as well as Nynaeve. So that's, helpful exposition as well. But I find him a fascinating character. I think that if I can make a prediction here, okay, with the death of Steppen and the prior scenes leading up to that, where they were talking about how a warder is not supposed to outlive their Aes Sedai, but they could potentially like rebond to another one, and we see the connection with Nynaeve and Lan over their conversations. I think this is a prediction of mine that Moraine is going to die at some point. And Lan is going to, like, Nynaeve is not even currently a novice Aes Sedai, but she will begin training as a novice, become a fully fledged Aes Sedai, or maybe, she'll still be a novice, but then Lan will bond to her instead of, killing himself like Steppen did. So that's a prediction.
Because we've seen a bit of a, not bond in the Aes Sedai way, but we've seen them have some moments, right? Nynaeve and Lan, There's definitely a little bit of thing going on. And Stepan was asking that too the night when he's hanging out with her, and he's like, so, about this wisdom. And he's like, there's nothing to tell. It's like, okay, bud. Clearly you're making eyes at each other.
Like, I don't want to talk about it. Okay, dude, all right.
Which, to be fair, he doesn't talk a whole lot. But that was something that was hilarious when they were in Shadar Lagoth, and Lan explains the history of the city, and Matt's like, two things. One, that's the most you've talked probably ever. And then two, why'd you bring us here if that's the case? That's funny because after that moment we hear Lan talk a lot more, but yeah, he's still very much the stoic, doesn't really wear his emotions out too much on his sleeve, which is why it's such a big deal when at the funeral he's beating his chest, and I don't know if he tears his shirt or if he just opens it, but he's very clearly distraught.
He kind of Clark Kented his shirt open. He didn't tear it, but he was like, oh, my man chest.
Yeah.
But he also first butt of the show, Lan. I mean, I wasn't expecting that much of a comparison to Game of Thrones with Thrones. Frankly, gratuitous nude scenes at some points. But dude just walked butt naked into a tub with his Aes Sedai in the first episode. Caught me a little by surprise. But Lan is probably my favorite character at this current moment. Least favorite character, I would have to say, oh man, it's not a character that I'm not interested in, because at this point I think all the main characters have done enough to get me intrigued as to not only who they are currently, but where they're going to go. They've all showcased different abilities and different potential that I am fascinated to see where it continues. So I wouldn't say it's least favorite in terms of lack of interest, but I gotta say least favorite because he's so hateable is Child Valda.
Oh yeah.
The High Questioner. And again, with another Thrones comparison, this guy seems like he's gonna be a King Joffrey type. Where the character is so well acted and so steadfastly evil that you have to hate him. But you have to also admire the job the actor's doing portraying such a villainous character. And I thought this episode was a great representation. I keep saying this episode. This most recent episode 5, was a fantastic representation of how devious he can be. And, we saw him get injured by Egwene as she and Perrin escaped his clutches at the last minute. Thanks to my guy Perrin's wolf abilities. We can get into that in a second. We
can go character by character in a bit.
But we can go by the four main characters here in a sec. Because, I did say I'm interested in all of them, but none of them are my favorite or least favorite characters in the show. But man, what a scene he had with Egwene and Perrin in his tent where he's trying to, force her to show her channeling abilities. Man, brutal, vicious, and I can't wait to hate this guy more. I don't think he died at the end because, again, you don't see a body. I'm never going to write somebody off until we see a corpse. But man, what an extremely hateable character.
Is it number 2 rule of Zombieland? Number 1 is cardio, number 2 is double tap.
In those moments when you're not sure the undead are really dead, don't get all stingy with your bullets.
And once again, we see Egwene just stabs the dude in the neck or the shoulder. She stabs him in the right shoulder, so not even where his heart is. He almost certainly is still alive.
Yeah, most people don't have their hearts in their right shoulder.
Bro,
you're right.
Meaning it's not even on the same side, so it's like far away from anything vital. It's like, Egwene, you don't want to be a murderer, but I understand she's this innocent, optimistic, young woman from this
naive,
naive, not naive, young woman from this backcountry, tiny little village. But at the same time, dude, it's like, you got to double tap here. You got to make
ice
sure
this dude. Yeah, what?
Sure he's down,
come on.
Man.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are some vital arteries, up in your shoulder. It's close enough to your neck that I'm sure that dude bled a lot.
Yeah.
But this dude was slicing Perrin's back open like it was hot cross buns, and you gotta ice that dude. I'm sorry. You just got to take him out when given the opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
You had a golden moment, and I'm sure he's going to come back with a vengeance and be a player later on. So, not that I'm not looking forward to seeing more of him, because, again, he was such a captivating presence on screen, and it's a really great representation of the kind of different levels of zealotry. I don't know if that's the right word, but there are clearly different levels of fanaticism within the White Cloaks and the Questioners. And I think, to see somebody all the way at the extreme end like Child Valda, I want to see more of this character, despite how much I wanted him to die. I'm glad that he didn't bite it early. Again, if maybe he is dead, but I highly doubt it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really interesting, just the range of opinions and worldviews that happens, even just through the 5 episodes that we've seen, and especially relating to the One Power, which is kind of going to be the main thread that runs through a lot of kind of wherever you go, people have to relate to the One Power in a certain way, one way or another, right? And we see people like him that either hate it and hate people that can use it, or claim to in a way to grab power. And we see that he is able to recognize that she can use it, even just from seeing her face 2 times, and clearly she didn't use it at all that he saw, right? He still is able to identify. So he's someone who's very clearly skilled in recognizing people that have the ability to channel, right? And so he's kind of made
he's
his
also
life
clearly
mission.
read the books. He was like, hey,
He did.
I recognize you. You're a main character.
Yeah.
I have to kidnap you.
He did. But then there's also all of the 5 where at the beginning, when they're walking through the woods, Rand is like, why do we trust her? And then Egwene is like, I trust her. I trust Moraine because she's the only one who isn't trying to kill us. And then of course we see Nynaeve learning more about the Aes Sedai, and clearly some of the Aes Sedai have their own kind of selfish, I don't know if nefarious is the right word, but definitely selfish motives, and some of them seem to be more good. And so it's really complex. Just because people have access to this magical power, right, the One Power, doesn't mean that A, they themselves are necessarily the best people, or B, that they're perceived that way by everybody, because a lot of people just have a general mistrust of this, which we especially see with the Matt, Rand, and Tom storyline, or I guess Matt and Rand and Tom is there, but when Rand is talking with Tom about the One Power, and specifically how men who use the One Power go mad, and Tom was talking about his nephew who unfortunately learned that he could use the power and was found and gentled, meaning he was stripped away from being able to use the One Power by Aes Sedai, and just couldn't take it, and it ended up taking his own life. And we see there, from a lot of the men's perspective, especially Matt and Rand, who, are aware of this now, they're going around super scared, the One Power for us means basically death, because if it turns out that one of us can channel, then we might meet the same fate. And we see that kind of happen later on when they're in Tar Valon on this last episode, and Matt turns to Rand after seeing Logain go by, who was just gentled in the previous episode and is clearly insane, right? When he stares up at them on the balcony and just laughing like a maniac. Matt turns and looks at him. Matt's not doing so hot himself, but he turns and he's like, if I ever end up like that, or if you ever end up like that, we have to promise basically to not end up like that, right? We basically have to promise to kill each other if, that's kind of what he implies, if it turns out that one of us can channel. And so it's really, really interesting how, there's definitely fear of the power for most of the male characters we've seen, except for the warders. And then more curiosity and intrigue from, Egwene at least. Not Nynaeve, although she maybe is more intrigued, but still really doesn't like the power and anyone who uses it so far. So it's really interesting, just all the dynamics, and it adds to such good character building, how there can be so many different reactions and responses off of magic, right? Which I don't know if you have had any extra thoughts on that, but I think they've done a really good job of portraying that, because that's something that's very much alive in the books, and I think they've done an excellent job of portraying that up to this point.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I do have something to add, and it leads me into kind of where we can bring the discussion next. It makes total sense that, knowing what each character knows, that they would be feeling this way about the one power. Egwene and Nynaeve obviously have had bad experiences in the past. Nynaeve especially, where she's like been totally turned off to anybody who could potentially be able to use the one power, but also is clearly the strongest out of anybody at this point. Potentially, like she went like Super Saiyan 3 and healed like everybody in the room after Logain went berserk and like killed like 5 people, and she was just like
heal.
Like I just made a visual gesture, which obviously isn't going to translate to the audio of this recording, but I mean, she looked like Nakali from Street Fighter hit the V trigger. Like that was ridiculous. She went completely nuts. I mean, in a good way, and I heard unlimited potentially internal power got unleashed, and that was a crazy moment at the end of episode 4. I stood up in shock. I was like, "What the hell was that?" I had to rewatch that scene because I wasn't sure what happened. And then I was like, okay, I still don't get it, but that was awesome. But yes, it also seems to make more sense that Egwene would be more interested in learning about the power, and the two boys, well, Matt and Rand, would be, more apprehensive of it, considering they know what can happen to, a male that uses the one power. And that'll lead me into the next discussion here, where we can talk about the potentials for the Dragon Reborn. And obviously, you have finished
I will
the
recluse
entire
myself
series,
from
so
this
you know
conversation.
who the dragon is. So this is just going to be me with my thoughts here for a sec. But I think having Egwene or Nynaeve be the Dragon Reborn takes away a really interesting potential dynamic where if one of them is the Dragon Reborn, they don't have to wrestle with the possibility of going insane. And I think that would be something really interesting for one of the other 3 to struggle with. Knowing that there are false dragons, there are men who can channel that believe themselves to be the dragon, but ultimately are not and go insane, is really interesting for one of our main characters to have to struggle with. So for that reason, I don't want to necessarily write off Egwene or Nynaeve from being the Dragon Reborn, but I think A, it would make for a less interesting story, and B, I want to lower their expectations for that in my mind. So in terms of like rankings, in terms of candidates for being the dragon, I think potentially the 2 girls are at the bottom.
Okay.
I also think Perrin, I would put probably 3rd of those other guys, and maybe it's not one of the 5. It could be somebody completely different, which would be a crazy red herring to have Lan and Moraine walk into the town and be like, it's definitely one of you 4, and then also not include Nynaeve, but then also just be completely wrong and have the whole premise of the series be askew from the start. That'd be really interesting. Maybe that'll happen. Maybe Lan is the Dragon Reborn. Maybe that's why his basically has dragon in his last name. But
maybe
Perrin in this last episode and throughout the previous episodes as well, but it really came to the forefront in episode 5, clearly has a connection with wolves somehow. I read a theory online that he's like a werewolf, but I don't read into that at all. I don't know if that's even a thing in this universe, but clearly he's got some alpha connection with the wolves. They had his eyes turned gold, and they answered when he was in need. They seemed to be like escorting him and Egwene to the Tinkers earlier out of danger. And one like licked his wounded leg, which was pretty weird. But we haven't heard about him limping since, so maybe I just
did it heal?
I don't know.
Did it heal in that month when they were traveling with the Tinkers? We don't really know.
I mean,
it's assumed so.
Apparently, dude would seem to be moving pretty well, but he's got a lot of damage on him now. But I think Perrin is 3rd in my potential dragon rankings because it seems unfair that you could be like the wolf and the dragon. He's not He's not Jon Snow. I mean, Aegon Targaryen. So cannot be.
You don't think that that's ability, that something just comes with, being the dragon?
Oh no, it totally could be, and it definitely could be. But I think it seems to me, and this is just my reading of it, that that's a separate ability, and clearly all the main characters are gifted with some sort of power. And that maybe makes me think that this is some sort of like Captain Planet situation where they're all different parts of the Dragon Reborn, and they'll all come together. They'll form like a Gotron, yeah, and they'll all be different parts of the.
They make
dragon.
A human pyramid, and then and then they're good to go.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe that's the case. I'd like to think that isn't the case because I think that's probably the least interesting possibility out of all of them. If they're all like, oh, the real dragon was the friends we made along the way, that'd probably be the worst actually. But that leaves Rand and Matt, and I honestly keep going back and forth about which one of them I think is the most likely candidate at this point. Matt obviously is dealing with some insanity that he caught at Shadar Logoth. Is that the name of the Shadow City?
Yep, I don't remember exactly how they pronounced it, but
I'm probably just gonna butcher pronunciations.
It's either Shadar or
Shadar.
It's either Shadar or Shadar Logoth.
Shadar Logoth.
Yeah.
Okay. But he's clearly caught like the venom parasite that was snooping around there. It showed up when they were at the farmhouse, and the Fade was like afraid to attack him for some reason. Like it was just in the shadows and didn't attack until Tom showed up. So clearly there's some crazy evil going on inside Matt right now that he's dealing with, and he looks in bad shape. Like Nynaeve showed up after finally meeting up with Rand and Matt in I forget the name of the
Tarvalon
city that the White Tower's in. Tarvalon?
Yeah. TAR space VALON.
Tarvalon. Okay. I'm going to do my best to remember all these places, and I'm sure that I won't actually do a great job of keeping them all straight.
That's right.
But Tarvalon, they finally meet up, the three of them, and she immediately realizes that something's terribly wrong with Matt. So that could be a sign. He's obviously able to channel somewhat, but I think he's got some potential going on there. He's also got this dagger, which seems to be, exactly the same thing as the Sith dagger from Rise of Skywalker. I hope he holds it up at a city somewhere and it shows him where the Death Star's buried. But all jokes aside, that dagger's clearly got some mysterious stuff going on as well. And Rand is giving off serious main character vibes. All the other characters have something unique going on with them, and not that he doesn't. We saw him bust down that door in that town that was supposed to be able to hold 5 men, and he just shouldered it down. He also ran into Loyal, who told him that he's a human.
Aiel.
Is that it? How you pronounce it?
Aiel.
Ailman. Okay,
Ailman.
it was just the show pronunciation that sounded goofy to me then.
Yeah.
Ailman, which I don't understand what that is because they didn't explain it at all in the conversation with Loyal, but I believe Tom talked about it earlier. I totally forgot what he said.
Yep. So
so if you want to fill me in on Ailman.
So I'll just jump in here. Just from what has happened in the show, in the previous town, which I do not remember the name of the town that Tom, Matt, and Rand were in before, the town that they met Tom in, right? Remember, Matt goes to take that big jewel from the guy that's in the cage, the corpse that's in the cage, right? And he has that conversation with Tom where Tom's like, what are you doing? And he's like, I was going to come and take something because I need money. Didn't think he'd need it. And then Tom's like, okay, I'll look away, but then you got to help me bury him. The body that was in that cage was, they had a short little conversation about it, and we see there that Tom says it's rare for anyone to have this color hair, orange hair, except for an Ayuman. And there's a very brief conversation where Matt's like, Ayuman, aren't they savages? And Tom says, they're warriors for sure, but people will always call savage what they don't understand, right? And so there's sort of So you can go back and rewatch that scene. I haven't gone into anything that we haven't...
Apparently I need to, yes.
Yeah, I haven't gone into anything that we haven't seen on screen. But basically, they're some sort of people that are warlike to some degree, that are very clearly live on the outskirts of society to some degree, right? We don't know exactly where they're from or anything, if there's anything special about them or if they're just different people. But clearly they're not seen regularly and they don't interact regularly. And Tom said it's very rare for this color hair to be seen, and the corpse had like ginger hair. And of course, that's why we see Loyal say, Rand is a ginger. He's like, you look like an Aielman, and he's like, I'm from the middle of nowhere town. Like, clearly I'm not.
And then he's like, an Aielman who claims that he is not an Aielman. Interesting. Loyal is another interesting character, not only because of his, outward appearance, but seems to have some weird philosophical stuff going on. Also seems like super racist against people. Thinks they all look alike.
Against humans.
And
they're always so hasty. Yeah, just like he's an Ent, dude. He's basically an Ent. He's just saying how humans age so quickly and are always hasty. He's just Treebeard.
Yeah, he clearly seems to thinks that humans are maybe a little bit lesser being than Ogiers to some degree, but it seems to be kind of good-hearted as well. I don't know if saying he's a good-hearted racist is something
maybe a bit misunderstood. We'll say.
Yeah, he doesn't necessarily have any ill will towards people, but he definitely generalizes them and probably doesn't understand them as well as he thinks he does. But so Rand as an Aielman, potentially. I mean, I'm assuming that he is at this point, based on what we know. Has shown some strength, and not that this necessarily means anything, but he was the first character that we were shown on the screen, and he seems to kind of be the main character, just based on the editing and progression of the story so far. Seems to focus on him a little bit more than the others. I don't know if you would agree with that, but he's definitely given me vibes as like, oh, all my friends are special. Why aren't I special too? But it's going to be like, oh, you're actually the most special of them all. You are the Dragon Reborn, and all your friends combined can just help you achieve your greatness in the end. So maybe that's a stretch, but I think he and Matt are the two that I see at this point having the most potential to be the dragon. Other contenders besides the main five, I suppose Logain was one. Now, I have a question, and don't answer... Well, okay, I was going to say don't answer if it's a spoiler for later, but maybe not answering it is also a spoiler. When somebody gets disconnected from the source, right, is that permanent, or can they become connected to the source again?
So, from the show, as far as we know, it's permanent. It's permanent.
Okay. I have theories that Logain will end up being reconnected with the source, but if it's not possible, then
well, no,
it's
permanent. They don't explicitly say in the show, but I mean, I guess we can infer from.
Well, then forget my theory.
We can infer from the comment that, or the conversation that Tom was having with Rand, where he says, that when his son gets disconnected, he basically loses all will to live, right? And so, if there is a way, nobody does it, and it doesn't happen. So it's
right. I figured that it's not super common. Yeah. If there's a male that is a threat,
no one's gonna do it.
And is going insane with the source. Why would you reconnect him with the power? That doesn't seem like it would be beneficial to anybody. So it makes sense to me that it wouldn't be a regular occurrence if it's happened at all. But I just was curious if it's at all possible. So thank you for not spoiling anything. I still theorize that it could happen. You never know, because Logain seems like he's not going away shortly. But
I would imagine that none of the Aes Sedai would have even tried to learn. There'd be no reason to even experiment with it. So, yeah. Okay,
that's fair. So I suppose he was a candidate at one point. Obviously he believed that he himself was the dragon, despite being, like Moraine said, like a flicker of candlelight against the raging sun that will be the Dragon Reborn, which is a sick line. And I'm not holding out. I'm gonna hold out some hope for my boy Lan that he could be the dragon.
Yeah.
I like him so much that I want him to be the main character. So
Do you want him to?
I guess we'll see what
do you want him
happens,
to go
but-
insane? Because he'd kind of have
No,
to if
but
he wanted.
won't the dragon? If they're the true dragon, they won't go insane,
I don't know.
right?
I don't know.
Well, that seems like a huge barrier to bringing peace to the
You
world.
were just
if
saying that,
you're-
right? You were saying that it'd be interesting to have the dragon maybe have to struggle with being able
Well,
to do that.
right, the issue of grappling with it, like obviously Matt and Rand have seen what the one power does. So even if one of them is the true dragon, they might doubt themselves along the way,
Yeah.
which I think could lead to some
Yeah.
interesting stuff.
That's a good point.
So just the possibility of going insane
Mm-hmm.
if they're not could sow doubt into their minds, and
Yeah.
they could feel unworthy of being the dragon at some point if it's one of them. Whereas if it's Egwene or Nynaeve, it's like, okay, they're the dragon. We have nothing to worry about. It's because even if they're not, they're still going to be a super powerful Aes Sedai, so we're good.
Well, I want to talk about Logain for a second because, from Moraine's perspective and from the perspective that we're given from the show, it's like, okay, this dude's just insane. Especially after episode 5, it's like, he's insane, right? Clearly, he's not the dragon. But if you envision from his perspective, he's not. You can't really fault him for claiming to be. From what we can see, he doesn't seem to have selfish motives. He seems to be pretty. I mean, he's not benevolent by any stretch because he declares a war in Galen in that the country, but
Yeah, that was ridiculous.
he has a chance to kill the king there, and he doesn't. He's like, there's a place for anyone by my side, right? It seems like his motives are at least generally good or very manipulative.
Yeah, well, that scene made me laugh because I was like, yeah, okay, you offered that the king could join you by his side after slaughtering his entire army and butchering your way up to the castle. You think if that was your message, you would have led with that instead of
That's fair.
killing your way to get to the king.
I guess he's kind of a meanie,
So-
but you can't really fault him for he hears voices that he, as far as he knows, are his past lives as the dragon, right? That's what he tells Moraine, and he's clearly insanely strong. It takes 2 Aes Sedai at all times, shielding him, preventing him from using the source. Clearly he's way stronger than any of the Aes Sedai that we've met up to this point because it takes 2 of them. So he's clearly one of the strongest people because the Aes Sedai probably sent some of their strongest to help deal with him. So you can't really fault him for thinking that he's the dragon, even if it turns out that he's not. From his perspective,
Yeah, no.
what else?
Right, and that's kind of the opposite of what I was describing could happen to, Rand or Matt or Perrin if they're the dragon. They, having seen the effects of what, a male being connected to the source can result in, might not believe that they actually are the dragon, even if one of them really is, because they're afraid of, what might be the insane result of their life and the terrible end that would occur for them.
Yeah.
Whereas, he was supremely confident that he was the dragon, and it led him down the path of insanity. So, yeah, Logain, super interesting character. I believe that you said a lot of his storyline happens kind of, obviously it's not off screen in the book, but it happens by just way of being told that it has happened instead of actually seeing it described. And so I think, obviously I don't have the book background, but it seems like it was a good change to actually show instead of just tell.
Yeah, no, that has been one of the best changes, I think, because it really gives you a good idea of okay, men go mad when they channel, right? And just how strongly some of the Aes Sedai, especially the Reds, feel about men who can channel and about the idea of the dragon too, right? And that's stuff that I think by him being more prevalent here, rather than being kind of something that happens off page, I think that's really, really good. And I don't know what that says about his character moving forward, if he's going to be around for a whole lot longer or not, but I think it's, I think it was one of the really good changes, although it is, not insignificant in terms of the amount of attention that's given to it. But so where all the characters are now, we see Egwene and Perrin dip out. They escape from the White Cloaks and are now just on the run in the middle of nowhere. We don't exactly know where they've ended up. And then basically everyone else is at Tar Valon. So Nynaeve is chilling with Rand and Matt, who is not doing well at all. That dude looks like worse and worse every time we see him. And Rand is just trying to be there for his buddy. And Nynaeve is finally just glad to see them because, again, she wasn't there with them in Shadar Logoth. She wasn't running from the Trollocs with them because the first person that she saw after she got dragged away was Lan and Moraine. And so this is the first time that she's seeing any of them since she got dragged off by the Trollocs way back in the first episode. And, you know, I think she's like 5 years older or something. We learned that in the first episode that she's 25 because she's had her braid for 5 years, right? And Egwene just gets hers in the first episode. So, you know, she kind of has it as her responsibility, all these young people, although she's young on herself. But we see, you know, those three with Loial, who we just met in Tarvalon, and Lan and Moraine there and Nynaeve is there at the funeral as well. And so it looks, two of the groups have reunited, and Perrin and Egwene are in the middle of who knows where. With that being the case for kind of the main characters at this point, with Logain, you know, being in Tarvalon as well in a cage, as far as we know, or as far as we last see. What are some of your predictions just for maybe the next episode or where you think the series is going as a whole? Do you think that we'll know who the dragon is by the end of the first season? Or is that something that they're going to keep teasing out a bit longer?
I mean, there's no way that we know who the dragon is by the end of the first season, right? If they do some sort of reveal where it's like, oh, Rand, you are the dragon reborn. Like, I'm sure it will be a red herring. You've said to me that the books don't really hide who the dragon is based on, you know, internal dialogue and who the writing focuses around. And the show is clearly trying to keep that a mystery. Yeah. I think if they're going to do the whole series, you know, I obviously don't know the progression of the story. Maybe, you know, once one of them achieves that understanding of becoming the dragon reborn, that I'm sure there's plenty of story after, because I can't imagine that it, you know, 13 of the 14 books are about finding out who the dragon is, and then, you know, the 14th book is it finishing up, right? So I imagine it's going to be somewhat early in the story, but I mean, it seems like they would get there way too soon if it's by the end of season 1. If it's not a red herring.
Lose a lot of that mystery and intrigue if they...
Right, exactly. It seems like the whole point of the show at this point is finding out who the dragon is, and if they reveal it already, you know, I don't want to say a lot of people will tune out, but I'll be like, oh, okay, I thought this was going to be a mystery that was going to keep going. So maybe because it's not hidden in the books, you know, they will reveal it at the end of season 1. They'll just keep it kind of an intrigue for season 1, and then the rest of the show will be, you know, everybody coming into their own, despite already knowing who the dragon is. Like, there's still plenty of story to tell in the war against the Dark One, I'm sure. But correct me if I'm wrong here. So Perrin and Egwene and the Tinkers were like in sight of Tar Valon, right?
Yeah, they were able to see it.
The White Cloaks picked them up. I don't understand how the Aes Sedai just let these zealots run rampant, like right outside their gates. Like picking off like there are Aes Sedai getting killed by Child Valda, and he's just like able to walk in their front yard. Apparently, I know they have the oath where they can't, you know, just commit violence against somebody unless they're, you know, fearful for their own life or
their warders or another
life
Aes
of their
Sedai.
warder or another Aes Sedai. But like clearly he's a threat to all Aes Sedai. Like, does that not qualify?
Well, first of all, before I answer that, I wanted to say I think one of my favorite lines of the whole series so far was when they were walking with the Tinkers and Egwene is like, "Did you see it?" And Perrin's like, "What?" And Egwene like points the direction he's already looking and is like, "The White Tower." And he's like, "Oh, now I see it. It's this skyscraper-sized gigantic tower, and there's not even any foliage. You can see right through it." It's like, dude, how did you not see that? But regardless,
hey, it was for the reveal for us, the watcher. And if we're going about favorite lines, I think my favorite line was when Matt and Rand were sitting up on the balcony, and just it wasn't even, it was a serious line, obviously, because of the context of the conversation they were having. But the delivery on Matt's line where he said, "I don't give a shit," that killed me. I was laughing so hard at that.
Yeah.
I was like, I had to rewind because they're obviously having a serious conversation about potentially going insane and having to kill each other if they ever reach that level. But he was just like, "I don't give a shit."
Yep. Dude,
so
good.
cavalierly. I had to laugh. He's definitely one of my favorite characters too, and he's bringing some levity to the situation despite being, again, in a bad way. But didn't mean to cut you off. You continue with your thoughts.
Yeah, and that's something that, I won't get into what the book says about it, but I'm just imagining, like, from what we've seen so far, Moiraine looked pretty shocked or surprised. I don't know exactly what the reaction would have been or what the specific word for it would be, but when the whole group is together way back in episode 2, I think, and Valda bumps into them, they make comments to each other like, "Did you see the rings?" So I don't know how public knowledge it is outside of the White Cloaks that Valda is specifically hunting down Aes Sedai. Because we do see in that group as well, there's the other guy that's with the White Cloaks who doesn't seem to hate Aes Sedai as much. He's like, "Hey, that injury looks really bad, and Aes Sedai is the only one that can fix it." Right? So it seems like even within the White Cloaks, there's a varying degree of like how much they hate or like Aes Sedai. At the very least, some of them will tolerate them. And so I don't know if either they're just being really secretive and like the Aes Sedai don't all know that they're outside of Tar Valon, which doesn't seem very likely. They kind of just walk around and don't really hide. Or the fact that maybe the Aes Sedai don't know that he's killing them. Maybe he's doing it secretly enough. Because Moiraine didn't seem to be aware, although she was aware enough to hide the ring when she saw them. So she's like, she knows that they didn't like Aes Sedai. I don't know if she necessarily knew that they were killing them up until the point that she saw them. But I don't know if everyone has that same knowledge, because if she didn't initially, I don't know. But it also might just be a plot hole where it's like, hey, they need another villain, and for some reason these guys are allowed to exist when they really shouldn't.
Yeah, I doubt that it's just a big plot hole. The question for me is not like why they exist, but why they're just like in the Aes Sedai front yard just doing whatever they want. I mean, they, like you said, Egwene and Perrin are like, "Oh, there it is," and it's just like looming. It's not even like on the horizon; it's like right there, and that's where they get scooped up. And I'm like, this is the Aes Sedai front yard, and these White Cloaks are just running rampant here. I know they got their oaths, but like this is baloney.
Well, maybe they're not allowed
Take a
to.
stand.
Maybe they certainly wouldn't go in, because I think if they go in, the Aes Sedai would have a problem with it. Maybe they're like, as long as you don't come in, we'll leave each other be. We don't really know. We don't know how long they were there, so unclear.
Yeah, true.
Maybe they'll discuss it, but
I'm sure a lot of this will be answered later on. They still have 3 episodes left in the season. I'm sure plenty will unfold. But man, what a show so far. I'm definitely hooked. I'm interested to see where all these main characters go. And I want to see more of this world. Like, we have basically seen different locations that they've been traveling to, but it's been, small town here, a farm there, on the road with the Tinkers, and we're finally at the White Tower in Tar Valon.
Valon.
I'm interested. Tar Valon. I'm sorry. Again, I'm just going to completely butcher all this stuff. Robert Jordan, make your things easier to pronounce.
Just say the White Tower, and then we don't have
the
to
White Tower. Okay. They're at the White Tower. And yeah, I'm interested to see where this story continues. I want to see a full conclusive story by the end of season 1. Obviously not the entire Wheel of Time saga played out, but certainly book 1 come to a fitting conclusion. I know a lot of people are, I don't know if worried's the right word, but concerned that either a lot of stuff's going to get cut out or they might not make it to where book 1 ended. I hope that it satisfies book readers and show watchers alike. And yeah, I want to see some stuff go down in these last couple episodes.
Yeah. I mean, it's clearly building to it, right? There was some exciting stuff that's happened, but clearly we haven't reached like a climax of any sort for the season yet. So clearly it's building to something, and I'm just excited. Man, I tell you, after watching this, I wish this was 10 episodes long. I know Amazon doesn't really do 10 episode seasons, but not necessarily because I think it needs it, because I do think that some of what's in the books, like if they use all of it, some of it would drag on TV, certainly. So I think for pacing, like it's fine, but just raw amount of stuff, I'm like, man, I just want to see more. And it's a bit of a bummer that it's not 10 episodes long. Although, of course, I would take 20 episode seasons and ask for more still. So I think it's on pace to, yeah, it will be interesting how the next 3 go, and what ends up getting revealed, and what, if any, new characters get introduced or not, or what new we learn about the main characters that we're already following, because we already have a decent sized cast. So we'll see how it ends up going, but we've been adding a character to every episode, so we'll see how that goes. But I'm very excited, and we were just talking, the last episode is going to be on Christmas Eve, which you'll actually be home for, and so we'll be able to watch the finale together, which is going to be super hype. I'll get your first-hand reaction. I'll just say it's been really fun getting to talk with you, someone that hasn't read the books, watching along, and also I've watched the last few episodes with Lydia, my girlfriend Lydia, and her brother, and Lydia has read half the books and is working through them right now, but she's, of course, finished the first book, certainly, and so I'm watching with her, so someone I can relate to, like, oh, this is different, this is similar, this is exciting to see these characters on screen. And also her brother John has been watching with us as well, and he's like you, he hasn't read anything, he didn't know anything coming in, and so it's been so fun getting to watch kind of with both of them and see there's different reactions side by side. So I'll just say, with any flaws or whatever, there's definitely been a little bit in some of the parts, but overall I'm just like, it's so exciting and such a fun time to watch, and I just hope that this series is popular enough and makes enough money for Amazon that it goes the distance, because for anyone that is along for the ride, it's worth it. So
yeah. And I hope they get some more, not that they have a small budget again, but I hope they get some more funding for a little bit better CGI, because man, the Trollocs in the first couple episodes looked
bad.
Pretty rough, not gonna lie. I think the magic that they're using to show channeling has gotten a little bit better, but still looks a little corny to me in some parts. I think when the Aes Sedai were trying to keep Loghain under wraps, it literally looked like he was under bubble wrap at some points. But yeah, I'm very much looking forward to the final 3 episodes of the show. And with the finale coming out on Christmas Eve, we should be able to have our thoughts on it out by the end of the year, and that should wrap up 2021 for us.
Crazy.
Our 21st episode.
21 for 21.
Look at that! We'll have 21 episodes in 2021.
Yeah,
have it out by the new year, and then obviously we'll have plenty to talk about afterwards. By that point, Hawkeye will be done as well. Spider-Man will be out. We'll have to, we might have to have a big 2-hour. Yeah, what are we even doing talking about Wheel of Time? I'm excited for this show, but Spider-Man No Way Home is probably one of the 5 most things I've ever been excited to watch in my life, and easily the most excited I've been to watch a movie since Endgame.
Yeah, agreed.
Again, I have. This is without any trailer previews. You know our thoughts on trailers, and Spider-Man is not something that I was ever on the fence about going to see. So I've tried to stay away from as much as possible. But man, oh man!
You mean to tell me you're more excited for Spider-Man than you are for Sing 2? I don't believe you. You guys can't see the face he's making right now.
I'm just going to completely ignore that comment. But we're also going to have Matrix and Kingsman out by that time. So, man, the year's going to end super, super strong here. And so much to talk about.
I missed it last year, man. Christmas is such a big time for movies, and we missed it last year. It feels good to be back. Feels good to be back, man.
It sure does.
Alrighty.
Sure does.
Well, we will keep you up to date on our thoughts as that happens, and if you haven't seen The Wheel of Time, go check it out. We actually didn't get into, really the plot that much. I mean, we talked about individual scenes, but, if you haven't watched it, go watch it.
Listen,
no, if you haven't seen it, go see it. I don't know what you're doing now.
Yeah.
If you have seen it,
we're fully into spoilers.
Yeah.
Go watch it. If you're tuning in to get previews for the episodes, we just ruined a ton of stuff, so now you're going to have to go watch to see what we were talking about.
If you've already seen it, I recommend going and doing a rewatch. There's a lot that you pick up on that you don't the first time watching. I highly recommend it. And And yeah, I'm excited. We got Hawkeye coming up here in a few days and another episode this weekend. So, man, it's going to be awesome. Stay tuned. We have exciting stuff coming down the pipeline. And anything else, or are we good to bounce on out of here?
I think we're about to sign off.
All right.
Talk to you
Roll
guys
the
later.
music.
Peace.